I think they're treating us all like idiots.
That if people are against mass migration or have concerns that mass migration is going to destroy Western culture, they are examples of extremism that can lead to violence.
If you can't change the government, change the people. The people vote for the wrong thing, so change the people instead. So,
hello and welcome to The Protagonist here on The Pulse with me, Nick Buckley. We have a great show set up for you again today. Another controversial topic, which shouldn't be controversial, but it is if you live in the UK. If you live in many Western countries now, there's something happening. It's called the removal of your free speech. It's called the removal of your rights. It's called the denigration of your rights in the country where you live. And we're going to get into that today. But first of all, let me welcome my guests onto the show. First of all, we have a gentleman who needs no introduction if you watch The Pulse, and he runs some fantastic shows on here. So our first guest today is Pelly Neroff-Taylor. As you know, a writer, filmmaker, and is written for the New Scientist, Financial Times, and the European. I don't think you could get many better publications, even if you disagree with them, than that. We also have Hedley Rees, MD and lead consultant at Palmer Flow Limited, which is all about medical supply chains. So first of all, welcome to this show.
thanks.
The title of today's discussion is Views of the British Working Class Are Being Criminalised. Well, that's factual. It's not a question. It's actually factual. Because many views over many decades have been criminalised in this country now. We have an attack on free speech. We don't really have free speech in this country anymore now. We have political prisoners in jail in the UK as we speak because they tweeted things or put things on Facebook, sent to jail. And to create those spaces in jail, we let perverts out, we let rapists out, we let serious criminals out of jail so we could have room to put political prisoners in. Some of those people committed crimes on the day they were released. We had one pervert who sexually assaulted a woman the day he was released early from jail. We had another person released early from jail, murdered someone that night in a gang. And they were released because hurty words online were more important to put people in jail for. Let me jump straight to you, Pelly. What's your view on this? Are we losing our rights? Are the working class views being persecuted in the UK?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's noticeable. I'm located in Sweden, and the climate is a little bit freer here. And it's also a very Anglophile country, but it's reaching even the average person, the fact that the UK no longer has freedom of speech. So I'd say, I mean, of course, the older ones associate Britain with hilarious Monty Python jokes and making fun of the royal family. And when I was a child and commuting between England and Sweden, I spent most of my time in the UK, but I spent the summers in Sweden. There was a huge admiration for the country of intellectual freedom. You'd spend your holidays. People, Swedes spoke fluent English. They'd go to England and they say they'll breathe in the climate of intellectual freedom. You'd make fun of the royal family. You'd never make fun of the Swedish royal family. And there was a kind of atmosphere of, I don't know, liberty. It really was. And you felt that, I mean, this was a kind of right-wing view, a bourgeois view. I mean, the left wing could say, well, the social freedoms of the working class, people living up in the north, it's a high tide of Thatcherism. They're not that well off. But I mean, the idea was that for all its faults in delivering equality, Britain still was a country that where you had a lot of freedom. Now I'd say there's almost a consensus that Britain is a country, and I see on social media that people say, Swedes say, I don't want to go to do my shopping trip in London this Easter because who knows what they might dig up on my social media, because I think if you're a Swedish citizen, you need to fill out a sort of visa form, electronic travel form, and who knows what they'll put they put AI to use and search the person's social media, and a lot of outspoken Swedes talking about immigration. So certainly there's a lot of that, and I've got a lot of British guests on my show, American guests, European guests, and the Brits, I would say, are the most cautious of the lot, and in the breaks or when the show's stopped going live, people say, I don't say half the stuff I want to say because there'll be the knock on the door, and that is that ever-present fear. Incredible. And the funny thing is, Britain is fighting this war in Russia more or less directly on the theme of freedom versus authoritarianism. But how free is it really?
Yeah, I mean, the British have always been good with irony, and that's a classic example there. Talking about free speech, I've got two friends who have been recently arrested because of their YouTube videos. One's called the Silver Fox Hot Takes, and the other one is called Craig Houston Talks To. Both of them large followings on YouTube, both middle-aged white men. Both have been arrested this last couple of months because of videos they've put out. And I've watched the videos they've put out. Nothing wrong with any of them. What happened was politicians they were talking about didn't like him, so used the police as an enforcement arm to shut them down. Let me jump to you, Headley. What's your initial take on this topic?
I think they're treating us all like idiots. It struck me about, 5 or 6 years ago on the London Underground, where they were saying things like, see it, say it, sorted. And then when COVID struck, call it COVID, or call it what you will, they were talking about stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. Well, it's psychopops, isn't it? They've been using psychopops on us. And I think, AI is the bigger picture because it's much easier to create psychopops when you can change videos, you can, make people dance and do silly things. So, so this is, to me, this is all linked up in this global attempt to control the world. And the more people are treated like idiots, the better. So, I think that there's a whole question mark for education systems, particularly in Britain. Some of my work is working with universities, running a virtual education platform in pharmaceutical supply chain management. And some of the assignments, I suddenly start to think, by gosh, that's a fabulous answer. By golly, how did they do that? It's beginning to strike me now that, students are using artificial intelligence, ChatGPT and all those things to do their work for them. So how are they going to build their skills of research? And the government is actually underlining all this, stupefying the nation. I think what we're talking about here is part of it, and people are accepting that the good old-fashioned values that we used to have. I sound like my father and my grandfather now. You used to have the bobby on the beat. Or if kids were playing up, they'd get a clip on the side of their ear and they wouldn't do it again. And they were close to the problem. Now, no one is close to what's happening in the physical world. It's as if the physical world has ceased to exist. So, and when I look at Boris Johnson saying those three words, and basically not knowing anything of what he was talking about. My experience is in pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, and biotech supply chains. And I know how much it's a travesty to call it misinformation, but how much false information by people who should have known better, by people in government who are benefiting from it, that it's left me speechless. So I'll finish with that.
You've raised a good point there.
Just say something there.
Go
on. Sorry, no, Nick. Maybe you want to go on to something else. Just the thing about AI was that I love AI. I mean, I think that it's like having the editor you always dreamed of, the sort of ghost editor always there, and you can shoot something through that I've written, and I say, "Oh my God, he's got that phrase," and you'll take the phrase out and use that. So it's like a very good editor, but of course it can take over. And I think a lot of students, I know people who are students, and everybody's using it. And it's, I bet you the common rooms of every single university around the Western world, people are saying, how can we fight ChatGPT? And they have all these various AI detectors and so on. And I don't know, it's a losing battle, and it is a negative thing. But what's worrying was related to the topic that we're talking about today is that when I kind of researching, it's good for research as well. What's in the news today, sort of thing, and you have to complement it. You can't let it take over your life. You've got to master it. You mustn't let it master you. But you've got to also be very aware of its bias. So if you ask what's in the news today, what's your take on UK legislation in this field? For instance, before this program started, they'll all, even Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI, has got a woke bias, and you have to work very hard to extirpate that. You have to re-ask the AI, that's too woke. What are your sources of this? Your mainstream legacy sources are The Guardian, and they're very biased. And an AI, being the servant that it is, says, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I promise to use better sources next time. You sort of ask it 3 or 4 times, and then it gets to more reasonable. But the AI is only as good as the source material that's out there. It basically hoovers up the entire internet. And a lot of the internet is very woke because of I think it uses a lot of government papers, it uses a lot of newspapers. And of course, we've got the New York Times and the Guardian. They're enormous archives, and they're enormous woke archives. And they might sort of trawl stuff that's coming from the anti-woke brigade, but numerically it's far less. So it's feeding this bias into students. And although I hear that, especially among young men, there's a kind of reaction against all this, a reaction that then they like Tristan Tate, they like Trump, they like Musk and so on. And I've had guests on my show in America. The young people voted for Trump, surprisingly. So J.D. Vance is perhaps secured a term if he takes over after Trump. But it depends on, and an interesting thing about particularly the UK, there was an article in the Financial Times which looked at woke attitudes or progressive attitudes, I think was the word used, in different countries. And it said that that everyone is more woke in Germany, US, and the UK were the 3 countries. But in Germany and the US, the men were much less woke than the women. But in Britain, both men and women were both more woke than either sex in any of the other countries. So Britain is much more woke than the US. And although I'm not as touched with the grassroots in England, that's kind of reflects what's going on in the UK. So in a way, it's not just an imposition on the population. It also reflects the views, at least of the middle class part of the British population, the graduate class.
Yeah. Point on artificial intelligence. If we're going to allow artificial intelligence to do our thinking for us, then we need to be aware who runs artificial intelligence, because the information has to come from somewhere, and it's a very easy way to manipulate the population, and all technology can be used for that. But jumping back to the core of this topic, a few days ago, the Prevent program was highlighted. If people who don't know what Prevent is, that's the UK's anti-extremism program. It was designed about stopping future Islamic terrorist attacks in this country, but it's had mission creep. It's gone off at a tangent now. But on their website, or some documents were released, and Prevent, again, which is anti-terrorism, was saying that if people are against mass migration or have concerns that mass migration is going to destroy Western culture, they are examples of extremism that can lead to violence. And people read that a few days ago going, what are you talking about? That means half the population in this country are now potential terrorists. That is some of the things the white working class are being put under in the UK. Headley, are you a terrorist? Are you a terrorist sympathizer? Do you think mass migration is a problem? Do you think Western culture being destroyed is going to be a problem? Are you a terrorist? You can admit it on this program. We don't mind.
Yeah, it depends what you mean by terrorist, but it's sad, isn't it, that what I would regard that normal values and protecting your property, being passionate about your homeland. I'm a passionate Welshman. I think Wales could do a lot better in the world of life sciences and pharmaceuticals if it played to its strengths. But we all have where we were born, where we belong, and I think there's a limit to other cultures, other people that can join your country, unless they are fully integrated and fully aligned with what's happening. We've got in the NHS, we've got doctors from India who come in, they build their skills, and anywhere where skills are focused in need areas, then that's good. But but just importing people into this country just to add to the labor force or to add some sort of diversity that is a woke theme in itself. I don't support that, and I speak out quite a lot. And I'm a bit nervous now. I might end up in jail, so I'm hoping some of you guys, if you aren't in jail, would help out.
Let me ask you a question again that's in your field of expertise. You just mentioned Indian doctors. Should we be importing Indian doctors into this country, or should we be training up British citizens to be the next generation of doctors? And if we do import Indian doctors, aren't we just leaving India slightly poorer and slightly less prepared to deal with their people in a medical sense than before we stole their medical staff?
Absolutely. I don't think people realize how much the NHS is dependent on overseas doctors and staff, medical staff, healthcare assistants, all that sort of stuff. But the whole education system, really, in medical school, I don't think the whole teaching of medicine doesn't cover the products that doctors and physicians use. These are drugs, medical devices, in vitro diagnostics. If you ask the typical doctor, in a medical student in a top university in the UK, how a drug gets to market, what the stage of the manufacture. In the same way that if you asked a pilot about a plane, he'd know there was, you had components, it had to be designed, there was an undercarriage, and they consulted very heavily when planes are designed and manufactured. That doesn't happen in medical school. So my big bugbear is the fact that, we've got doctors as a generation who are not aware of the tools of their trade, how they behave and how they work. I think there's a massive gap for that. And so we're not really producing our own doctors through our education systems with the real breadth of skills. So it's only a short-term initiative to bring doctors from overseas over, but it seems the NHS wouldn't survive without them. So, what's going to happen in the future? How are we going to rebuild this skills piece?
Yeah, gents, stay with us. We need to go for a break now, and when we get back, we'll jump to Pelly and let's dive deeper into this conversation. See you after the break. Welcome back to the protagonists here at The Pulse. Pelly, let me jump straight to you. What's the agenda behind not listening to the working class in Britain? What's the agenda about persecuting them, criminalising them? What is behind all this?
Well, I mean, certainly it's not about winning the next election, because the Labour Party and the London elite have totally abandoned the old working class, who have gone to reform. And I think that it's basically what they're doing is they're trying to, it's like East Germany when they said, if you can't change the government, change the people. The people vote for the wrong thing, so change the people instead. So they had a massive social engineering program because people didn't want the same things that this communist elite wanted. And we're now in the same situation where the values of the political class, SW1 as Dominic Cummings called them, are totally out of sync with reality, because Britain is not benefiting from what's going on financially, and neither of the countries from which immigrants are coming. I just wanted to add a parenthesis about that. It costs lots of money to educate a doctor, and then these poor countries can't afford to lose them. But of course, Britain poaches them. I mean, where's the justice in that, So, and not even progressives talk about that enough, which they ought to, because they're hemorrhaging their educated class to the West, which is basically, it's a kind of imperialism, if you like. Anyway, no, I mean, what's happening is that I think that the political class are also in a real mess. They've this Russia war, which is their little baby, a gang of totally Russophobic people inside the Foreign Office and MI6 and the media, and they started, or they provoked this war, Russia. They then cut off the gas, cheap gas, which Britain thought it wouldn't affect it because they thought that Russia would be toppled with sanctions. But of course, everything, inflation, everything that's resulted from that war has raised prices and made life much more difficult for the Western working class. So there's a huge cost of living crisis, which can be traced back to the sort of fun and games that MI6 had in Ukraine, basically. So I can't understand for the life of me why they're not trying to stop immigration. Is it I think what's happened, I can guess. I think that maybe there's some. My guess, I can speak more freely, is that at some point, young, smart Muslims thought, well, I'm not going to become a terrorist. I'm going to become a barrister. And there is probably a sort of a cohort of extremely educated, really radical people working in the British justice system, which is as powerful and lobbied up as ever. And they're basically putting the total brakes on any immigration reform. Either that, or the political class in Britain is stupid, or I don't know what's wrong with them. Because even people are blaming Starmer now. The Tory papers are blaming Starmer, but it was the Tories who started this mass migration, which lest we forget, was not normal back in the 1990s. I mean, there's virtually no immigration up till 97, when Blair started to open the floodgates. He said, we'll rub the working class or the Tories' noses in diversity. I can't understand it. And no one I've talked to in Britain can understand why you're letting in 1 million people a year in a country which has overtaken Netherlands as the most crowded country in Europe. Why are you doing it? And so what they're doing is that this free speech restriction follows on from stupid policy making. So the people are critical of this immigration, which is transforming society. And I mean, most migrants are good and fine people, but I mean, immigration is not the same thing as being racist. Of course, you can be against immigration and be a great humanitarian, as the Swedish leaders were in the 1970s. They spent a lot of money on the third world, and they said, well, we can't have Sweden's high trust society diluted. We all have to speak Swedish and we'll all work as a team in this country. And they didn't. And it was norm all over the social democratic societies that lived through the Cold War. There was no acceptance of mass immigration. I don't know what happened. If a political class are bribed, sort of sexual bribes or something, or money bribes, or I don't know what it is. These are our enemies, as I see the globalists. And it's both left and right, as it were. They don't listen to the people. They're doing this incredibly unpopular policy, and what they're doing to compensate for it is restricting speech on it. And I don't think it's going to end well, because it's basically like putting a lid on a pressure cooker. Free speech is a ventilation outlet, and I think I don't know if you want to go there, but there's a guy working for King's College, David Betts, I think his name is. He wrote in Military Strategy magazine that the country where a civil war is most likely to break out in the next 5 years is Britain, followed by France, and then he goes on to argue why. But I'll stop there for the moment.
Yeah. I spent an hour chatting to David Betts on my podcast. It's a very good discussion. Answering your question about why we're in this mess. We're in this mess. I mean, from 1948 with Windrush, the people of this country didn't want immigration. We had a cabinet report and investigation in 1950, 2 years after the Windrush landed, because people up north didn't want any more immigration into their communities. That was 1950, and it's got worse every year since, and now it's been turbocharged, as we all know. The reason why it's continued is because it's easier to follow the status quo for politicians. All politicians only want to be elected again. And to solve some of these problems, and solve any problems, takes generations, and they know they will not get the benefits for investing their time, energy, and career into fixing these problems. So they want short-term fixes. So they want short-termism. Hence why we heavily rely on immigration. We could train our own doctors, our own nurses, our own engineers. We could do many things in this country. But do you know what? It's going to take a decade, isn't it? Do you know what? We need doctors today. Let's carry on importing and stealing people, medical staff from around the world. That's why nothing gets done here, because weak politicians with no backbone won't grasp the nettle and solve the problem for the long term. Headley, does that sound correct to you, or have you got a different opinion on that?
No, I'm fully aligned with what you're saying there. It's it's a real concern building your own resources. I mean, this started with, and again, I'm not a sort of historian, but to me, we had Maggie Thatcher who did the privatization. So she sold all our assets off. Now we've got the most disconnected brain network the world has ever known. Then Tony Blair basically created all these new universities when really, you know, the people who would have gone into the skills that we need, important skills, what we used to call trades, instead of, and you could say nursing is the same. You know, nursing, the vocational careers have all been sort of taken away because we send people off to university to learn the theory, and who's learning the practical stuff, and then so Tony Blair then took it to a new level. He put skids into the whole thing, and now we've got universities in Wales that are so dependent on overseas students. This is what I'm told, that they're in danger of going broke because they haven't got the fee-paying students if the overseas students don't sign up. Uh, and we've got the City of London. What happened to manufacture? It's all gone to China, you know. And I'm a production engineer by degree, so, and I am absolutely gobsmacked at the fact that in the UK now, we've got almost no skills in manufacture. It's all overseas. So, you know, and adding value was all about making things, you know, invisible trade like insurance and the City of London. That wouldn't exist if it wasn't for people creating value in industry, and the UK have just thrown it all away.
The reason why we send so many people, young people, to university, which is about 50% of young people now go to university, it's not to educate them. It's not to give them a good job at the end of it, because most of them don't get a good job. It's to ensure they think the right way through the rest of their adulthood. It's a propaganda arm of the government. Hence why we have useless degrees like gender studies and lesbian dance theory. And there was a degree in Salford on pop music. And we have these degrees not because they're worth anything, but because 3-4 years at university being bombarded with woke nonsense and social justice and how bad the British Empire was and how racist the English are. It's and then you put those people into every workplace. Even if you're stacking shelves at Tesco's, you've now got mini social justice warriors with a 2 degree stacking shelves. And it was Blair's attempt to create a new generation of the working class, because the working class have always thought the wrong things. Pelly?
I couldn't agree more. And I think what's happened is Britain has lost those practical skills, and manufacturing and engineering. Of course, you know, it's a kind of male skill, if you like, and they don't get to do this. They don't get the sense of purpose from doing practical stuff. They might not be that academic, and they're forced into this very feminine-centric university environment, and some of them kick against the pricks, and they're reported for it. So in a way, it's not just a war against the working class. It's a war against the male. And, you know, we could have a whole discussion about that endlessly. But I mean, and these guys can't get jobs. They have university degrees, they have loans, they have debts. Some of them indoctrinated, and then they feel a sense of resentment because they're stacking shelves and not getting that nice job. Some of them are YouTube influencers, a tiny minority, and then they're looking for simple solutions. So it could be racism, it could be Trump is Hitler or something like that, and just getting rid of Trump would solve all their problems. And then they're sort of unmarried at 40, and we're not creating the next generation. I mean, it's all interconnected. I mean, our populations of the West are cratering. You know, I mean, it's like we're committing a mass genocide on ourselves in a way. I mean, someone has worked out that in South Korea and some East Asian countries, South Korea will have 5 people in its population in the year 2100 if their birth rate continues like this, you know, and Germany will have a couple of million and so on. So, you know, we don't need wars, although wars benefit the military industrial class. We're doing it fine, and it's all tied together with not having rituals, not having to bring us into adulthood, not having children, having no career path, no maturity progression path, and all those things that used to come with a more stable society where you all knew your neighbors, and maybe having working class communities. There was also maybe a sort of solid kind of respect, you know, the authority, paternalistic figures around you, and a lot of people are chafing at that. Of course, I don't want to say we go back to that, but now we're all individuals, and now we're all living in a sort of atomized, diverse society, and there's none of that pressure. And so a lot of young men, rather than stacking shells, go with their tutus and play video games all day and watch porn, you know. So it's all these things are like interconnected in a way, and get depressed, and then they find themselves, they can't say anything. And I just want to say something about the Prevent Act. It basically, I mean, all those things that HR used to be in charge of, I mean, HR is sort of the secret police of the corporate world. Now nurses and teachers and everyone else is going to have to report far right indications among their population. So this surveillance society, often conducted by sort of women, you know, it's all a bit like the One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest. Remember Jack Nicholson fighting against this bossy authoritarian nurse? Well, it'd be like that in spades in every workplace and every school in Britain if this Prevent things gets passed. But it's all part of the same trend.
You hit something then that I think is completely correct, which is this is an attack on masculinity. This is an attack on men, and we see it throughout society. So when we talk about an attack on the working class, what we really mean is working class views, which are traditional views, which are masculine views. Hence, you know, why they attack us for, you know, you're racist for not wanting mass migration. Traditional men don't want mass migration because they can see the potential danger in mass migration, the other feminization of society. And you're right, the way men are dropping out, young men are dropping out, you know, and relying on porn, drugs, alcohol, rejecting women, rejecting society, turning to violence, is because there's no place for them anymore now in society. Because to be a good man now, you have to be more like a woman. Again, this also feeds into the trans nonsense. Why do you think men are wanting to become women? Because life's easier as a woman. Because you're more accepted if you've got female views, female personality, not being over feminized. Society loves you for that. But if you're a man's man, then you're toxic, aren't you? You're toxic, you're evil, you're a domestic violence abuser. That's the sort of person you are. And look at some of the terminology we use now. Mansplaining. If a man tries to correct a woman or speaks to a woman, you're mansplaining. We're not allowed to sit on a tube now with our legs open because we have testicles and we don't want to crush them. Because that's called manspreading. That's you trying to take up more space in the carriage because you think you're better than everyone else. It's because I've got testicles. That's why I sit with my legs slightly apart. It's common sense. Headley, do you think, well, we all think we're over feminized. Is it an attack on masculinity? Is that what's really happening in the West?
Well, I always refer to Mother Nature with these discussions because, you know, I think Mother Nature has a particular way, and it's the same with your health. You know, trust Mother Nature, trust your body. It's the same. You know, men and women are very different. Their brains work differently. There's a lot of research that explains that, and women have huge strengths in certain areas like networking, building families, and men have strength, you know, physical strength, and they could be much more focused in their activity for a period of time. So I think the two must work together to form, you know, exactly how we need to live our lives. That men be men and women be women. And what's happened in industry and work over the years, where there's been positive discrimination towards women. Women have been trying to become men mentally, and men have started to become women because of the positive discrimination. That's the best way I could describe it. But, you know, let's be honest, this whole woke thing is about overturning nature. You know, we've got no control over the world, how people are born or how the world works, trying to overturn nature and create some artificial world that doesn't exist and never can exist.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that since the 1960s in the West, especially in the UK, we've had more and more feminist policies. Every decade, you would say we're a more feminist society. We've been over feminized more and more. That's factual up to today. But during that time, every decade, British women report they're becoming more and more unhappy every decade from the 60s onwards, which means the more feminist policies we introduce, the less happy women become. At this moment in the UK, 20% of British women in the UK are on antidepressants because the life they've been told they want and is good for them is killing them, is making them unhappy, and it's doing the same to men. Male suicide is horrendous. 5,000 men kill themselves in the UK every single year. No one's happy, but yet we keep having the same policies. We keep enforcing those policies and having them go one step further. We'll jump straight back into this after the break. So stay with us, gents, here at the Protagonist at the Pulse. See you soon.
Get your favorite merchandise from our official The Pulse shop. You'll find exclusive online t-shirts, mugs, hats, hoodies, and more at thepulse.today.
When the world's endangered animals need help most, when their lives are at greatest risk, when they would otherwise be lost, the International Fund for Animal Welfare is there, taking action to rescue the animals we love, to protect them and their threatened natural habitats. But the danger to animals the world over is growing, and the need for your help has never been more urgent. On land, you'll help stop poachers from threatening and killing elephants and big cats for the illegal wildlife trade. In the oceans, you'll help rescue dolphins, whales, and seals from deadly hazards. And you'll help rescue, rehabilitate, and release vulnerable animals when disasters strike. Here at home and around the world, we can't do this work without you. See how you can help animals and people thrive together at joinifall.org.
We come from a long line of farmers, and there's a sense of pride with being part of these multi-generational businesses. But there's also a significant amount of pressure. My senior year of high school, my dad made the decision that this world no longer needed him in it. I don't know if he was overwhelmed by the bills and checks that weren't going to be coming in because of the strawberries dying off, but it breaks my heart that my dad made a permanent decision for a temporary issue. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone.
Farmers have to take care of their physical and their mental health, because what's a farm without a farmer?
In the mornings, that's my time. Watching the sun come up, I can have a cup of coffee and exercise if I want to. It helps me start the day with a sense of gratitude. Every day is a new opportunity. Don't forget to check in on yourself. Love, your mind.
A hoax about carbon dioxide in the climate has caused a global energy and economic disaster. Today's News Talk. The Pulse.
Welcome back to the Protagonist here at The Pulse, where we're discussing the criminalisation of the British working class for having the wrong views. Have the right views, you might be an MP, you might be successful. Have the wrong views, we're going to lock you up. There's many tools our government are using against wrongthink and the British working class. One of them is non-crime hate incidents. Pelly, are you aware of non-crime hate incidents?
I am, yes. I mean, I keep in touch with the Telegraph. I don't agree with their foreign policy views at all, neither on Israel nor Ukraine, but they're a bit anti-woke. And so I know about that. And was it in Scotland as well, where they went to extreme lengths? That guy who was I can't remember. You could go into your local clinic or something and report someone for something that offended you. Anyway, no, I'll back away from that. But yeah, I've heard of them, but I can't cite a specific example. I know that Alison Pearson, who's a columnist at the Daily Telegraph, I think she was up for one, and she's been leading a pushback against it. But yeah. I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? This idea that you're not actually committing a crime, but you're committing a thought crime, and it can hang over you if somebody's looking for to employ you or something. And so people won't take that risk, will they? Especially in a tight labor market. and where the HR rules and reigns supreme, you know.
Yeah. So again, the Tories introduced non-crime hate incidents. The Tories over 14 years were absolutely disgraceful. So a non-crime hate incident is something where it's not a crime, but if someone perceives it to be hateful, just hateful, or if someone who's not even witnessed it hears about it and perceives it to be hateful, they can report it to the police or one of the many sub non-police stations around the country. There's libraries who will take reports on this. There's hairdressers. You could actually volunteer in your community to be a hate reporting centre where you take these reports yourself. They're then filtered into the police system, and then you have a non-crime hate incident against your name on the police database, which will show up if you apply for a job where you need a police check, and it'll come up with non-crime hate incidents. So you don't even know this has happened. You're not consulted with it. It doesn't go to court. It goes straight on your record. You've got no right of appeal, and you don't even know it's there most of the time until you apply for that check to get a job, let's say working in a nursery, and it comes back with, you've got a non-crime hate incident for racism. Of course you're not getting that job. Of course you're not. Where was the due process? And the theory behind this is to stop genocide. The theory behind it is a genocide happens because of many steps, but one of the first steps on the pyramid to genocide is people saying things they shouldn't say. So we stop tomorrow's genocide by stopping people today saying things we don't want them to say. It's Orwellian. It's absolutely crazy, and there's tens of thousands of incidents of this in the UK. There's thousands a month going on. Headley, have you heard of non-crime hate incidents?
And no, I hadn't. It sounds a bit horrendous, really, because you've got that hanging over your head. It's not a law, but it can, it can affect your future prospects. But to be honest, there's so much legislation being passed over the years through these various governments. I don't know what what the laws are anymore, and I think lots of people now are concerned that they may be subject to some sort of censorship or some sort of stopping them doing things, or even being reported to the police, and being totally unaware. And it always used to be ignorance of the law is no defense. But you'd have to be a barrister or a top lawyer to understand all these various acts or laws that have been passed in Parliament, the ordinary person seems to have no impact, no way of basically complaining that this isn't fair.
There was one case of a non-crime hate incident where somebody, for whatever reason, meowed at a group of people, and that was deemed as hateful, and he got a non-crime hate incident registered against his name for meowing at a group of people.
Wow.
I can't figure I can't figure out the hate there. Even I disagree with him anyway, but I can't figure out why he would get that. But we have lost free speech in the UK because we started this conversation with that, but we're losing free speech online because there's things you can say in the street in the UK that you can't say online because of the Communication Act, because there's different laws now that apply just online. So if you take offence online, that is a new crime. But you could say the same thing to the same person stood on the street corner, and that's not a crime. How does that make sense, Pelly?
Well, just a few things. I mean, it doesn't, but and from what I understand, people have been prosecuted for what they've been saying in private WhatsApp groups, which is basically a conversation between friends, And I don't know whether somebody's been ratting on them from inside that group or whether literally the police are monitoring, and they have the capability to do that. I understand from my cyber tech friends. But I mean, I've just before the show started, I said, what are the different laws UK censorship laws in action. And just referring back to what Headley said,
Mm.
there's the Communications Act of 2003, the Public Order Act of 1986, the Racial and Religious Hatred Act of 2006, the Online Safety Act of 2023, the Malicious Communications Act of 1988, the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act of 2019, the Defamation Act of 2013, the Official Secrets Act of 1989, and then the proposed Employment Rights Bill Amendment of 2025, which is going to prevent people from saying hurty words in the pub with their mates because of the bartender might overhear it, and the Digital Economy Act. So all these things, and Headley, I mean, how are we supposed to keep track of them? But yeah, I mean, but just one thing though, just to be a bit of a nerd about it, I looked up free speech in different countries. There's a survey, there's an organization, I can't remember, called the futureofreespeech.org, and actually says that figure 24 in this, I mean, it's really fascinating. Supportive regulation of social media content. The UK is the bottom of the list in terms of believing that free speech should. Only 7% believes in the UK that no one should regulate free social media speech. That's below Kenya, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Russia, Australia, Pakistan, and Taiwan. And top countries: Sweden, Hungary, and Poland, and Czech Republic, all former communist states, and the United States. So Britain, there is. I mean, it's not as if the British are always chafing at it. As you said, Nick, you know, there's been a propaganda in the universities for decades. So a lot of the Brits go along with this. They've been persuaded perhaps there's no alternative. There is a lot of support for social media censorship, according to this study. So, yeah.
Yeah. And again, you can link this back to having an over-feminized society, because a feminist trait, a feminine trait is harm avoidance. And that's what a lot of the woke agenda is. It's harm avoidance. Don't say those things. You're going to hurt someone's feelings. Don't say that. It's not very nice, is it? And it's what we get in schools now with their anti-bully policy. We don't teach people how to stick up for themselves. That's not an anti-bully policy. What it is telling people don't be bullies. Bullies will be bullies. We have adult bullies. We need to get people to be stronger and learn how to defend themselves. And as a nation, we've lost that. And we've lost it because we've been in peace for so long. The populists now think this is the natural state of things. We've not had a war now for all my lifetime, really. And we don't think there's enemies out there. We don't think we need to discuss serious topics and upset each other to get to the truth. Let's live in peace and harmony. But do you know what? It's not going to last. We see it around the world now. It's not lasting until we become a serious country again with serious discussions and a respect for the truth and a respect for freedom of speech. We're going to be in huge problems. Headley.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something that I saw Jeremy Corbyn say about the British Empire. You know, and we've still got in Britain that the whole empire, and when we look at problems, we sort of take we look to the part of our history that solves those problems. And I'm not an expert in this in this area, and this is a bit left field for me, but I do think that the colonialism and all that sort of stuff linked to the Britain is a huge baggage that is influencing what happens here. And Pele and you would know more than me about that. But you know, it does make me think what's happening in Palestine. You know, I could cry when I see what's happened there. Anyone, you know, who has seen their country basically stolen away in part. Again, you know, I remember seeing the various wars out there, and you would know the history better than me. But just as a layman, it doesn't seem fair. And there's so much going on in the world now that does not seem fair, and we seem to have no way of controlling it. And one of the most unfair things of all has been what happened with lockdowns and, you know, the whole pandemic, which really turned out to be not what it appeared. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world's never been fair. The world's never been a fair place to live. And life has never been fair. Life's always been hard. There's times where it may have been slightly easier for certain people in certain situations, but the world's a hard place to live, and life's a hard place to experience. Pele, colonialism is that part of the problem of what we're suffering from now? The repercussions of that.
Well, in the sense that colonialism, but I mean, even Sweden, which didn't have any colonies, almost have the same problems as the UK. Not as bad, not as extremist, not as violent, not so much resentment, and it's a much larger country with a much smaller population, so it feels less crowded. But there are some of those things, and people say we have to atone for the white man's colonialism, even if Sweden didn't have any colonies, although there was an island off the West Indies for 50 years or something, 3 centuries ago. But the Swedes used to get a lot of popularity in the third world, and Swedish prime ministers go down to Africa and say we're the good white man sort of thing. But they've got the same problems as the UK. So just blaming colonialism on the legacy of imperial. But I think that there is I'd like to highlight another thing about. I've been trying to combine my belief that the UK is run by a kind of deep state that starts wars and things, with my belief that Britain is also a woke country, and I haven't quite worked it out. But I do think that some of this, there is a kind of woke imperialism where the British and the American New York political axis, New York London political axis, legal, a lot of barristers are trying to kind of spread woke culture to countries which don't have no truck for it. And I think that's making Britain very unpopular in much more conservative countries. And I think the Russians have very successfully built up this conservative coalition of countries. So, I mean, while Britain was very popular for teaching the world how to speak English and so on. I mean, there's a lot of respect for that, even though it's controversial. And then in the 1960s and 70s, a lot of people loved the Beatles and Monty Python and all that. But now Britain's main cultural export seems to be kind of woke, the culture of woke. And I don't think that's not popular anywhere. It's uniting everyone against them. So I think in the world race for influence, BBC contra Russia today sort of thing, the Russians are winning out because the British have done an own goal with this woke imperialism, and now the Americans are kicking back. They think the woke empire starts in London, and they think Trump as a hero in the mold of George Washington, And I see a lot of social media people saying we had 1776 so that we didn't have to have your 1984, your authoritarian socialist British state that has always oppressed us. So in a way, the kickback against woke is going to affect Britain negatively around the world.
And I think and we can see that, I watched a Christmas advertisement from Russia featuring Putin a couple of years ago, and even I enjoyed it. He's dressed up as Santa walking around the house, and everything he sees with, the LGBT crap or immigration crap, Santa changes it with a magic wish. And I'm a Westerner, a patriot, and even I'm going, I like that. Well done, Putin. So, it is affecting our reputation around the world. And the people who are standing against the woke and the woke ideology really are the working class, because the middle class have already fully gone. Educated working class have been to university. Most of them have been brainwashed. It's the average working class people from the council estates who work with their hands. They're the last group of people to be converted to woke. I think it's dying across the globe. I think it's dying in the UK. I think we're past peak woke now. It's going to be hard to get out of some of our public institutions, but we will if we get a decent government over the next couple of years. We've probably got about just over a minute left. Headley, you've got about 20 seconds. Final thoughts from you.
Well, I just think we need to return to values that are real world values, the ones that ethics, the ones that Mother Nature taught us. And I think there's too many politicians who are not seeing that as important. And that's all I'll say.
I agree. We can't have 100,000 years of development and then think of a couple of decades, suddenly we know better and we're going to change everything. Pelly, last 20 seconds from you.
Britain should reintroduce free speech. It should become well known for free speech. It should seize that mantle again. Have a constitutional amendment or something in the British Constitution. Free speech is the freedom. If you don't have free speech, you don't have any freedoms. And then cancel all this rubbish, all those acts I reeled off earlier, and Britain will be a better place and more respected around the world and become great again. Freedom is where it's at.
And freedom of speech is where it starts. And freedom of speech doesn't mean you're going to enjoy what other people say. They will say nasty things. They will say things you don't like, but it gives you the ability to reply to them. Anyway, thanks gents for coming on the show, and catch us again at the Protagonists.